I stood at the curb of the arrivals terminal, veil in one hand, gift bag in the other, and watched 3 black SUVs pass me by. Each one had tinted windows. Each one could have been them. But not one stopped. I wasn't invited. Not really. The invitation came as an afterthought in email, not even printed, and it said nothing about picking me up. No, we can't wait to see you. No, let us know your flight details. Just, ceremony starts at 4. Be there if you can. And I could. So I came. I hadn't seen my son, Jacob, in nearly 2 years. He moved out to Arizona after his tech startup got bought. Too busy, too far, too successful. I was proud of him, always had been. But something in the tone of our last calls left a cold patch in my chest. Like I was something he had to fit around his life now, not part of it. Still, I brought the veil. It was my mother's, passed to me on my wedding day. Lace so fine you could see moonlight through it. I paid to have it professionally cleaned, boxed in acid-free paper, flown carry-on so it wouldn't get wrinkled. I imagined his fiancée Allison. I wasn't even sure if the spelling would be touched by the gesture. I imagined her hugging me, even crying a little. But no one met me at the gate. No text, no directions, just an address for the hotel I booked myself. The Arizona heat wrapped around me like a punishment. I'm not a young woman anymore. Travel takes its toll. My knees ached, my back pinched from the long flight, and I hadn't eaten since Dallas. But I stood there waiting, watching for a face I knew. It never came. After 20 minutes I gave up and ordered a lift. The driver was kind, asked if I was in town for something special. My son's wedding, I smiled. That's wonderful, he said. And I nodded, trying not to cry. The hotel was fine. New, sterile. The kind of place with plastic flowers in the lobby and no soul. I checked in, left my bag, then opened the box with the veil. It still smelled faintly of lavender. I laid it gently across the unused bed, like setting out a blessing. The wedding was tomorrow. I had nothing to do tonight. No rehearsal dinner. No invitation to meet the family. I scrolled through Jacob's social media, and there they were, pictures from a rooftop cocktail hour. Him, glowing in a tailored suit, standing beside a slender blonde in white. Her smile was wide, eyes perfect. Friends laughing. Wine glasses raised. Not a trace of me. I closed the app and stared at the ceiling. Morning came with a text. Jacob, ceremonies at the Wildfield estate. 4 p.m. That was it. No address. No, looking forward to seeing you. Not even a hi mom. I had to Google the venue. It was 45 minutes away. No shuttle. I called the front desk. They offered to call a cab, but the price was outrageous. I texted Jacob. Me. Is there anyone who could give me a ride? No response. By noon, I knew I had to figure it out myself. I wore the navy dress I saved for the occasion. Modest, elegant. I pinned a brooch at the collar, one my husband gave me on our 20th anniversary. I wrapped the veil back in tissue and tucked it into the gift bag with the card I wrote the night before. To Jacob and Allison. May this veil carry your love the way it carried mine. Mom. At 2:30, I stood in front of the hotel again, waiting for another lift. The driver was late. Traffic. Then the wrong turn. By the time we reached the estate, the ceremony had already started. I could hear the music drifting on the wind. A violin, soft and soaring. Guests were already seated. No one noticed me as I stepped out of the car, dust clinging to my heels, gift bag trembling in my hand. I didn't want to interrupt. I stood at the back, near the edge of the hedges, just far enough to stay invisible. I saw Jacob standing under a white arch laced with flowers. I saw her walking toward him, radiant. He looked happy. He looked gone. After the kiss, after the cheers and applause, the guests began to scatter toward the patio for the reception. I stood frozen in place, veil clutched like a lifeline. No one saw me. Or maybe they did, and they didn't care. I walked slowly toward the gift table, hoping maybe Jacob would spot me, or someone would say, "Oh, you must be Jacob's mother." But I heard nothing. Only laughter, clinking glasses, and music I didn't recognize. I left the gift bag on the table. It looked small next to the others. Shiny boxes wrapped in gold, envelopes with bows. Mine was plain. No glitter. Just love. I turned to go, but then I heard his voice behind me. Mom. I froze. Slowly, I turned around. He stood there in his suit, taller than I remembered, a drink in one hand. His eyes flicked down at my dress, then the gift table, then back to me. You came. It wasn't joy in his voice. It was disbelief. You didn't think I would? I asked, forcing a smile. He didn't answer right away, just gave a sort of half nod. I didn't know if it would be too much for you. Too much, I echoed. He glanced over his shoulder, like he didn't want to be seen with me. Jacob, I said gently, I brought the veil. He looked confused. What? The veil? From my wedding? From your grandmother's? I thought Allison might like it. Oh, he said flatly. That's nice. I waited. For gratitude. For anything. But it didn't come. She already has one, he added. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Of course. That makes sense. An awkward silence hung between us. He shifted on his feet. I should get back, he said. Photos. And just like that, he turned away. I stayed for 10 more minutes. Just long enough to see him laughing with friends. Kissing his new wife. Posing for the camera. Then I left. I didn't say goodbye. No one stopped me. At the hotel, I pulled the veil back from the gift bag. Unused. Unwanted. I folded it slowly, like burying a memory. I lay on the bed fully dressed, staring at the ceiling again. Hours passed. The party would go on without me. The photos would be printed, and I wouldn't be in a single one. My phone buzzed once, close to midnight. It was a message from Jacob. Sorry about today. Things got crazy. Hope you made it back okay. I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed. I made it back. Thanks. But I didn't hit send. I turned off the phone, placed it on the nightstand, and closed my eyes. The morning after the wedding was too quiet. The hotel room hummed with air conditioning and the distant sound of cars speeding down the highway. I opened the curtains just enough to let a sliver of light fall across the carpet. It didn't feel like morning. It didn't feel like anything. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. My suitcase was half open. The navy dress hung over the chair. The veil lay folded in the same box, untouched. I didn't know what to do with it now. Part of me wanted to leave it here. Let the maids find it and wonder who it belonged to. Maybe it would be passed down to someone who actually wanted it. Maybe it didn't matter. I thought about going to the front desk and asking for an earlier flight home. But my return ticket wasn't until Monday, and it was only Sunday morning. 2 days left in Arizona. 2 long, hot days in a strange city where my son had just begun a life that clearly didn't have room for me. I got dressed and wandered down to the lobby. The breakfast buffet was nearly empty. A few families sat with paper plates and waffle syrup. I poured myself a coffee, grabbed a banana, and sat alone by the window. A woman beside me smiled politely. In town for something special? I nodded, unsure how much to say. My son's wedding. Oh, how wonderful. Was it beautiful? I paused. It was. From what I saw. She tilted her head, curious. You didn't attend? I was there, I said quietly. Just not really included. Her smile faltered. She didn't know what to say to that. Most people didn't. We pretend families are always tight, always connected by something unbreakable. But sometimes the strings fray. Sometimes they snap. I'm sorry, she offered gently. I nodded, grateful for the kindness. Later that afternoon, I walked. I wandered downtown, past boutiques and bakeries and outdoor cafes. Arizona had a raw kind of beauty. Wide skies, mountains that looked like old bones under the sun. But I felt like a ghost drifting through it. I passed a bridal shop and stopped. In the window was a mannequin wearing a veil. Longer than mine. Wider. Perfect. I stood there staring for a long time. In my head, I heard my mother's voice from decades ago. Someday, you'll pass it on, darling. A wedding veil is more than lace. It's history. History. That's all I had now. That night, I ate in my room. I didn't have the heart to sit in a restaurant alone again. The hotel TV played some old sitcom. I watched it on mute. Around 10 p.m., my phone buzzed. Another message from Jacob. Can we meet for coffee before you leave? I stared at the screen. I didn't answer right away. I went to the bathroom, washed my face, brushed my teeth. Then I came back to it. I typed when. The reply came a minute later, tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. There's a place near your hotel. Ember and Oak. I didn't respond, but I set my alarm. Monday, 8:30 a.m. I wore something simple. A pale blouse, dark slacks, soft shoes. Nothing dramatic. I didn't want to look like a mother trying too hard. I brought the veil. Still folded, still in its box. I didn't know why. Ember and Oak was small, stylish. All warm woods and hanging lights. A barista with a nose ring took my order, and I sat by the window, fingers wrapped around my cup. At 9:04, Jacob walked in. He looked tired. Slightly hungover. The collar of his shirt was wrinkled. He spotted me, waved. "Hi, Mom." I stood to hug him, and he let me, but it felt obligatory. We sat. The silence between us was thick. He ordered a coffee, then leaned back, sighing. "I'm glad you came." "Are you?" He looked surprised. "Of course. You didn't act like it." He winced. "Things were just hectic. Weddings are crazy, you know." I nodded slowly. "But you didn't make time for me. Not before. Not after. Not even to introduce me to your wife." He stared down at his cup. "It wasn't intentional. There were just a lot of moving parts." "That's not an excuse, Jacob." He didn't respond. I reached into my bag and slid the box across the table. This was supposed to be hers. I thought it might mean something. He opened the lid, lifted the veil delicately. "It's beautiful. It was your grandmother's. Then mine. It's been in our family for almost 100 years." He nodded. "I didn't know that." "Because you didn't ask." Silence again. "I'm sorry," he said eventually. "Really, I should have done more." I looked at him, really looked, and saw the same little boy who used to fall asleep on my chest. The same boy who cried when he broke his first bone. The same boy who promised to never move too far away. "I don't think you meant to hurt me," I said gently. "But you did." He nodded again, slower this time. "Allison's mom was very involved. I didn't know how to balance it. She planned everything. She took over." "I understand," I said. "But you still had a choice." He blinked, eyes glistening a little. "Yeah. I raised you," I whispered. "Alone. I worked 2 jobs for years. I gave you everything I could. And I'm proud of you. But you left me behind somewhere. And I'm not sure you even noticed." He reached across the table, touched my hand. "I'm sorry, Mom." Tears welled in my eyes, but I blinked them back. "I don't want apologies. I want honesty. I want to know if I still have a place in your life." "You do," he said firmly. "You do. I've been selfish. And I didn't realize how much until I saw you leaving the wedding without saying goodbye." I breathed out. "I didn't want to ruin your day." "You wouldn't have." "I think I already had." "No," he said quickly. "You didn't. I messed this up." He looked down at the veil in his lap. "She didn't have a veil like this," he said. "Hers was just for photos. Fast fashion. This feels like it matters." I nodded. "It does." He cleared his throat. "Maybe we can keep it for the future. If we have a daughter someday." That caught me off guard. I smiled, despite myself. "I'd like that." We talked for another hour. About small things. About big ones. About nothing and everything. When we stood to leave, he hugged me again. This time, it felt real. "I'll call you more," he promised. I didn't say anything, just held on tight. Back at the hotel, I packed the veil again, this time with care, not sorrow. My flight home was quiet, peaceful. When I landed, there was a text waiting. "Jacob, I told Allison about the veil. She wants to meet you properly. Maybe come visit us this fall. We'll make time. I promise." I stared at the screen a long while. Then I typed, "I'd like that. Very much." And I hit send. I returned home on a Tuesday evening, just as the sun was setting behind the maple trees lining my street. My little house was just as I'd left it, quiet, clean, waiting. I set my suitcase down and stood in the living room, unsure of what to do next. Trips like this always leave a strange aftertaste. It's not just the jet lag or the exhaustion. It's the emotional shift. You come back to your life, and somehow, it feels a little too still. I walked into the kitchen and turned on the kettle. The ticking of the old clock on the wall filled the silence. There were no messages on my landline, no letters under the door. But when I checked my phone, Jacob had texted again. "Jacob, we fly out for the honeymoon tomorrow. Just wanted to say again, I'm really glad we talked. Allison sends her love." I stared at it, then typed, "Have a safe trip. Tell her I said congratulations." He replied with a heart emoji. I smiled faintly. I sat at the kitchen table, tea in hand, and looked at the empty chair across from me. It had been 9 years since my husband passed. And even after all this time, I still caught myself turning to speak to him sometimes. Especially on days like this, when the house was too quiet and the world outside kept spinning without asking how you're doing. The next morning, I went through the box of wedding things I hadn't touched in years. Old photos, letters, my wedding dress, still preserved in its case. There was a folded-up napkin from our reception, with my husband's initials embroidered in gold thread. I smiled at the memory of how he'd spilled wine on it and insisted on keeping it for luck. I thought about Jacob's wedding again. Not just the ceremony, but all the moments I'd missed. Meeting the bride's parents. Seeing how he'd grown into his adult life. watching him laugh with people who didn't know anything about me. But I didn't feel bitter. Not anymore. Just sad in a softer way. Later that week, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo of Jacob and Allison on their wedding day, smiling. Her dress was stunning, and in her hands, she was holding the veil. My breath caught. Underneath the photo was a handwritten note. Dear Mom, Jacob told me everything. I'm so sorry we didn't think more about what you needed that day. This veil is the most beautiful thing I've ever worn. Thank you for trusting me with it. Next time, we want you at the center of everything. With love, Allison. Tears rolled down my cheeks before I even finished reading. Over the next few weeks, things slowly shifted between Jacob and me. He started calling more. Just quick check-ins sometimes, but it mattered. We talked about the honeymoon in Greece, about their new apartment, about his work stress. He even asked me for a recipe pot roast, the one he hadn't mentioned in years. One night, he called late. Mom, he said, can I ask you something? Of course. Were you lonely when I left for college? Like, really lonely? The question hit me like a stone. I said honestly. But I wanted you to go. I wanted you to fly. I think I was so focused on getting away, he said, that I forgot I was leaving someone behind. I didn't speak. I let the silence answer. I didn't mean to make you feel forgotten. I know, I said softly. I want to do better. You're already doing better, Jacob. He was quiet, then said, thank you, Mom. For everything. Not just the veil. For all of it. A month later, a package arrived at my door. Inside was a framed photo of me and Jacob from when he was 5. We were in the backyard, both covered in flour from baking cookies. He had written underneath it, every good thing I am started with you. There was also a plane ticket. Phoenix. Thanksgiving. I called him immediately. You didn't have to do this. I wanted to, he said. Allison wants to cook with you, and we're thinking about starting a family soon. You should be part of that. My heart swelled with something I hadn't felt in a long time, anticipation. That Thanksgiving, I stepped into Jacob's home for the first time. It was warm, lived in. Allison greeted me with open arms and wouldn't let go for a full 30 seconds. She smelled like cinnamon and had flour on her cheek. We've been cooking all day, she said, beaming. They showed me the nursery room. They'd already started painting soft yellow walls, a rocking chair in the corner. Jacob wrapped his arm around my shoulders. We don't know yet, but just in case. I looked at him, older now, but still mine. I smiled. You're going to be a good father. He looked down at me, eyes wet, because I had a good mother. That night, as we sat by the fire after dinner, Allison handed me a box. What's this? I asked. Open it, Jacob said. Inside was a delicate glass case, and inside that a veil, carefully preserved again. We want you to keep it, Allison said. Until the next time. I touched the glass, heart full. Thank you, I whispered. Jacob leaned close. Mom, you belong here. Not just for holidays. Always. And for the first time in a long time, I believed him. That night, I lay in the guest room, the sound of laughter still echoing faintly through the house. A home. Their home. And mine too, in some small way again. I looked at the ceiling, hands folded over my chest. The veil was back with me. But this time, it didn't feel like a relic of the past. It felt like a promise. A week after Thanksgiving, I found myself humming again in the kitchen, something I hadn't done in years. The December light slanted softly through the window. I had flour on my hands, cinnamon on my apron. I was making the same molasses cookies Jacob used to sneak from the counter when he was 7. The same ones that made his eyes go wide and his cheeks sticky. The phone rang, and I wiped my hands on a towel to answer. It was Jacob. Guess what? He said, breathless with excitement. What? Allison's pregnant. I dropped into the nearest chair, heart fluttering. Oh, Jacob. She's only 8 weeks, so we're keeping it quiet for now. But I couldn't wait to tell you. Tears stung my eyes. I'm so happy for you. For both of you. There was a silence on the line, but a warm one. Mom, he said, softer now. I was thinking, would you want to be there? When the baby comes. Like, stay with us a while. I covered my mouth with my hand. Yes, I whispered. Yes, I would. That night, I took the veil box down from the shelf again. I opened it slowly, carefully. It wasn't just lace anymore. It was a thread that had pulled my life back together. A quiet witness to grief, to change, to forgiveness. I tucked a note into the folds. For her when she's ready. And if it's a boy, we'll find something just as special. Love always. Grandma. I smiled at the word. Grandma. It tasted sweet on my tongue. The winter passed gently. Jacob sent sonogram pictures. Allison called to ask me about baby names. They wanted something timeless. Something warm. We settled on Margot if it was a girl. Caleb if it was a boy. I started knitting again. I hadn't since my husband passed. But now I made tiny hats, soft as clouds. Booties that could fit in the palm of my hand. And every evening, I walked the quiet streets of my neighborhood, thinking of all the years that had passed me by, all the things I thought I'd lost, and how some came back not in the same form, but in ways I never expected. One morning in late March, Jacob called again. Allison's going to call you, he said. She wants to ask something. Before I could respond, the call ended. A few minutes later, the phone rang again. Hi. Allison's voice was bright, but a little nervous. I wanted to ask if you'd come out here a little earlier. A few weeks before the due date. I'd feel better having you close. I swallowed hard. You'd really want that? Of course. Who else is going to teach me how to hold a newborn without looking like I'm breaking a porcelain doll? We both laughed. Then she said quietly, also, I'd just like you here. There it was. The thing I never got at the wedding. The place I thought I'd never have again. A seat at the table. When I flew back to Arizona that spring, it wasn't with the same ache in my chest. It wasn't with the boxed veil or the fear of being forgotten. It was with purpose. They had prepared the guest room just for me. Soft linens. A little welcome note on the pillow that said home is better when you're here. And Allison, now showing, hugged me tighter than ever. You're going to be the best grandma, she whispered. The days before the baby's arrival passed slowly, sweetly. Jacob would work from home, checking on me every few hours. Allison and I would bake or walk or fold baby clothes. Sometimes she'd nap with her head on my shoulder, just like Jacob used to. And one night, I told her stories. About my husband. About how he'd hold Jacob in the crook of his arm and sing off-key lullabies. About how scared we were when Jacob had his first fever. And how we sat in the hospital waiting room all night, holding hands, not saying a word. She listened, eyes glassy. I wish I'd known him, she said. He would have loved you, I replied. He had a thing for smart, stubborn women. Allison laughed. Jacob sure does. When her water broke, it was 3:17 a.m. Jacob drove like a man possessed, and I sat in the back seat holding her hand, whispering, You've got this, baby girl. You've got this. It was a long labor, almost 13 hours. But when Margot arrived, all red and wrinkled and screaming, I wept like it was the first time I had ever seen life. Jacob held her close and kissed Allison's forehead, sobbing. And then he turned to me. Do you want to hold her? I nodded, arms shaking. He placed her gently in my arms. Her weight, her warmth, her breath. I stared down at that tiny face, and everything that ever hurt, everything that ever ached faded. I'm here, I whispered. You're safe now. That night, back at the house, I stood in the nursery. The moonlight painted silver on the crib. The rocking chair creaked softly as I sat in it, still in awe. Jacob appeared at the door, leaning quietly against the frame. I know I wasn't a good son for a while, he said. You were finding your way. He nodded. But I don't want to spend the rest of our lives making up for lost time. I want us to build from here. Together. I stood, walked to him, and held his face in my hands. We already are. By the end of that visit, Allison asked if I might consider moving out closer. Not to live with us, she said quickly, unless you want to. But nearby. Same city, maybe. I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said, if you'll have me. 3 months later, I sold the house I'd lived in for 32 years. It hurt, packing up memories. The way the hallways echoed once everything was gone. But I knew I wasn't leaving my life behind. I was stepping into a new chapter. Now, I live in a little cottage 15 minutes from their home. I see Margot nearly every day. I hold her, sing to her, feed her pureed apples, and tell her all the stories I once told her father. And the veil? It sits safely folded in a glass box in her nursery, waiting. Maybe she'll wear it one day. Or maybe she'll choose something entirely her own. Either way, she'll know the story. She'll know who carried it. She'll know who carried her. Margot turned 2 this spring. She runs now wild, fearless, curls bouncing, feet smacking against the hardwood floors like thunder in a tiny storm. She talks too. Not always clearly, but enough for me to understand. She calls me Nana. Sometimes Nana Bear, when she's feeling particularly silly. On Wednesdays, Jacob brings her over after work, and we make soup or watch the birds from my back porch. She climbs into my lap, tiny fingers pointing at the trees. Look, Birdie. I nod, every time, like it's the most important discovery in the world. Because to her it is. One rainy afternoon, I opened an old box in my hallway closet. I had been meaning to sort through it for years, but never had the heart. Inside were letters from Jacob back when he was in college. Handwritten. Some angry. Some lost. One where he said, "I miss Dad, but I don't know how to talk about it." I sat on the floor with those letters for hours, reading through the years I had almost forgotten. The pain, the separation, the longing, but also the growth. I tucked one into a new envelope, sealed it, and wrote, "For you, when you're ready." I gave it to Jacob the next time I saw him. He looked confused, but didn't ask. Sometimes, healing doesn't come from answers, but from being willing to revisit the hard questions. My health isn't what it used to be. Some days, the stairs feel steeper. My hands ache more when it rains. The doctor says my heart is aging appropriately, which is a polite way of saying it's slower now, tired. But my spirit? It feels lighter than it has in decades. I've built a new rhythm here, volunteering at the library twice a week, baking for the neighborhood kids, hosting a monthly story time in my living room. Margot sits right in front, wide-eyed, sometimes correcting me when I forget a word. Once, she asked, "Nana, are you old?" I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my tea. "Yes, sweetheart," I told her. "Very." She tilted her head. "But not too old to play." Never too old to play. That summer, on the 4th of July, we had a picnic in the park near Jacob's house. Allison laid out a red checkered blanket. Jacob brought lemonade. Margot tried to feed the ducks with hot dog buns. At one point, I stood back and watched the me family, whole and laughing under the sky. Jacob had his arms around Allison's waist. Margot danced in circles, arms out like wings. It struck me then, suddenly, how fragile this all is. How life spins forward, no matter who gets left behind or found again. And I realized, if I hadn't shown up that day at the airport, if I hadn't carried that veil, if I hadn't stood there alone and uninvited, none of this might have happened. Grief could have stayed grief. Distance could have become silence. But I showed up. And somehow, it made all the difference. That fall, they asked me to write something for Margot's memory book. A letter, for when she grows up. It took me weeks. But eventually, I wrote this. Dear Margot, one day, you'll wonder where you come from. You'll look in the mirror and ask why your eyes are shaped the way they are, or why you feel things so deeply you can't always say them out loud. When that day comes, I want you to know, it's because you carry stories. Your daddy once ran from his past. I once feared I had no place in his future. But love has a funny way of circling back. It finds you when you least expect it, sometimes standing by a curb, holding an old veil in a too-new city, praying someone will notice you. Never forget this, my girl, you belong. In every room you walk into. In every life you choose. In every love that chooses you back. And if one day you wear that veil, or even just hold it in your hands, know that it is not just Lacey, it's the strength of women before you. Their courage, their heartbreak, their joy. Be kind, be fierce, be soft, be bold, and always come home. With all the love I've ever had. Nana. On Margot's 3rd birthday, they gave me a small gold locket. Inside was a photo of her as a newborn on one side, and on the other, a picture of me at her age, black and white, grainy, grinning with wild pigtails. Jacob fastened it around my neck himself. It suits you, he said. I looked in the mirror. I wasn't young anymore. My face was lined, my hair silvering. But in that moment, I felt timeless. The veil now lives in a shadow box frame above Margot's bed. She knows the story. She tells it to her stuffed animals. This was Mommy's veil, and Nana's veil, and her mommy's veil. It has magic. And she's right. Because it's not just fabric. It's resilience, passed down. It's grace, mended and mended again. It's love, quiet and patient and stubborn. Like me. Sometimes I still sit by my window in the evenings, when the light turns gold and the breeze carries distant laughter. I think about that day at the airport. How no one came. How I stood with the veil in my hand, uncertain, unseen. And I thank God I didn't leave. Because had I turned back, had I let that pain tell me I didn't matter, I would have missed everything that came next. I would have missed my son's apology. I would have missed my daughter-in-law's embrace. I would have missed Margot's curls and giggles and sticky fingers. I would have missed coming home again. I don't know how many years I have left, but I know this. I will spend them being present. Not just remembered, not just respected. Present. In the room. In the story. In the heart of things. I will hold my family close, even if their lives move faster than I can walk. And one day, when Margot grows up and perhaps has a daughter of her own, maybe she'll carry the veil too. Or maybe she'll choose something else entirely. Either way, I'll be there in the thread, in the memory, in the quiet way love endures. Because I showed up. And that was enough.